A Millionaire's twins were struggling desperately in the pool, fighting to keep their balance. Their father, helpless and distant, watched on, feeling frustrated by the lack of progress. Suddenly, the housekeeper's daughter, fearless and unhurried, got into the water to help. If this beautiful story of overcoming adversity and love has caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. Continuing, the March sun beat down on the terrace of the duplex penthouse in Greenwich, reflecting off the crystal-clear water of the infinity pool that stretched out to the view of New York City. Robert Miller adjusted his sunglasses and watched the movement down below, where the cleaning company staff were finishing up the last details for another day in his family's routine. At 32, he had built an empire in the tech industry, but no professional achievement compared to the daily challenge he faced as a father to special needs twins. Michael and Gabriel, his 6-year-old sons, were born prematurely after a difficult pregnancy that took his wife, Francesca. The early delivery resulted in injuries to both children's spinal cords, confining them to wheelchairs since the first few months of their lives. Robert remembered the day the doctors explained the boy's condition as if it were yesterday, their words echoing like a distant sound in his memory. Spastic cerebral palsy, they said. Permanent motor limitations, they added. But to him, Michael and Gabriel were not limitations. They were his sons, and he would do everything in his power to give them the best life possible. The mansion was specially designed to meet all the twins' needs. Internal elevators connected the 3 floors, ramps replaced stairs, and every room had carefully planned adaptations. Robert had hired the best physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists in New York. The boys' schedule was meticulously organized: hydrotherapy at 8 in the morning, physical therapy at 10, a special lunch at noon, occupational therapy at 2 in the afternoon, and so on went the structured routine he believed was essential for their development. But there was something that bothered him deeply, a feeling that grew with each passing day and which he couldn't name. Despite all the resources, all the technology, all the qualified professionals, Michael and Gabriel seemed distant, as if they lived in a world parallel to his own. During therapies, they cooperated mechanically, following instructions without showing any joy. Their dark little eyes, so much like their mother's, carried a seriousness that didn't suit their age. Robert stood up from the solid mahogany chair that dominated his private office and walked to the panoramic window. Down below in the garden, he could see Mrs. Constance, the housekeeper who had worked in the house for 3 years, watering the blue hydrangeas that Francesca had loved so much. Constance was a simple woman from rural West Virginia who had moved to New York in search of better opportunities for her family. She worked with dedication and kindness, always with a smile on her face and a kind word for the boys when she met them in the hallways. What Robert didn't know was that today would be different. Constance had asked to bring her daughter Beatrice to help with the heavy cleaning of the house. The 28-year-old had been unemployed for a few months after the small company where she worked as an administrative assistant closed its doors during the economic crisis. Beatrice needed money to finish her degree in education, which she took on Saturday nights, dreaming of one day working with special needs children. When Beatrice arrived at the mansion for the first time, she was impressed by the grandeur of the place. The marble walls, the crystal chandeliers, the paintings by renowned artists, everything breathed luxury and sophistication. But what caught her attention the most was the silence that hung over the immense house. It was as if all that opulence couldn't muffle a subtle sadness that floated through the rooms. Constance introduced her daughter to the few household staff members. There was Rose, the cook who prepared the boys' special meals, always calculated by the nutritionist to meet their specific needs. There was also Charles, the driver who took the children to medical appointments and therapies in an adapted vehicle with its own lift. And there were the therapists who arrived punctually every day, carrying their folders and equipment, ready for another work session with the twins. Beatrice carefully observed the house's routine during the first morning. Everything worked like a Swiss watch, every movement calculated, every activity planned. But where were the laughs? Where was the spontaneous play? Where was the happy mess that every house with children should have? She had grown up in a simple family, in a small house in the Bronx, where the noise of the neighbors' games mixed with the joyful shouts that echoed down the street. Here in this mansion, everything was silent, controlled, almost clinical. It was during lunch that Beatrice saw the twins for the first time. Michael and Gabriel came down in the private elevator, accompanied by Mrs. Maris, the nanny specialized in children with special needs. The boys were in their state-of-the-art motorized wheelchairs, dressed in impeccable clothes with perfectly combed hair. They headed to the adapted dining room without talking to each other, as if following an established protocol. Robert appeared a few minutes later, still in his work shirt and tie. He sat at the head of the table and began to talk to his sons about the day's activities, asking about the physical therapy exercises and their progress in speech therapy. Michael answered in monosyllables, while Gabriel just nodded. The conversation was polite but cold, like a business meeting between strangers. Beatrice watched everything discreetly from the kitchen, where she was helping Rose organize the dishes. Her heart ached as she noticed the distance that existed between that father and his sons. Robert clearly loved them. That was visible in every detail of the house, in every precaution taken, in every resource made available. But there was an invisible barrier between them, perhaps built by fear, overprotection, and the anxiety of doing everything right. In the afternoon, while cleaning the living room windows, Beatrice heard the voices from the occupational therapy session happening in the adapted room on the ground floor. The therapist, a middle-aged woman with a firm professional voice, guided the boys through specific exercises. Michael, try to hold the pencil like this. Gabriel, push a little harder with your arm movement. Concentrate, boys, you can do it. The instructions were technical, precise, but Beatrice felt that something essential was missing: spontaneity. When the session ended, she saw Michael and Gabriel being led back to the elevator. They seemed tired, not physically, but emotionally. It was as if they carried an invisible weight on their shoulders, the responsibility to meet expectations, to improve, to constantly progress. Beatrice wondered, when was the last time those children had simply played without therapeutic goals, without targets to achieve? The day was coming to an end when Constance called her daughter to see the pool area. The place was stunning, with a breathtaking panoramic view and water so clear it looked like a mirror. There was even a specially adapted shallow end, with support bars and a lift system to facilitate the twins' access to the water. Robert had spent a fortune on those adaptations, always thinking of his son's well-being. But the pool remained practically unused. The hydrotherapy sessions took place at a specialized clinic, with a heated pool, supervised by professionals. Here at home, the water was just a decorative element, beautiful to look at but distant from the boys' reality. Beatrice ran her hand through the warm water and imagined how wonderful it would be to see children playing there, laughing, splashing water, making that happy mess that only childhood can provide. That night, on the way back home, Beatrice couldn't stop thinking about the twins. Constance noticed her daughter's restlessness and tried to console her, saying that every family had its own way, that Mr. Robert was doing the best he could for the boys. But Beatrice knew there was something beyond the best medical care. There was something called joy, spontaneity, the freedom to make mistakes and try again. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Robert was putting his sons to bed in the adapted room they shared on the second floor. The beds were special, with safety rails and a lift system. The boys took their evening medications, brushed their teeth with the nanny's help, and lay down quietly as always. Robert gave them a good-night kiss and remained for a few minutes watching them in the dark. Michael and Gabriel slept peacefully, their angelic faces illuminated by the soft light of the lamp. Robert questioned whether he was doing everything right, if all that extreme care was truly bringing happiness to his sons. He had promised Francesca before she passed that he would do everything to give the boys a full and dignified life. But were absolute control and constant therapies synonymous with a full life? Outside, the city of New York continued its frantic pace, millions of people living their own stories, facing their own challenges. In the Greenwich penthouse, a millionaire father questioned his choices while his sons slept, protected by all the technologies money could buy. And in a small apartment in the Bronx, A young woman dreamed of ways to bring joy to those two special children she had met that day. Destiny at times works in mysterious ways, connecting seemingly different lives through invisible threads. Robert didn't know it, but his life was about to change completely, and it would all begin the next morning, when Beatrice would return to the mansion, bringing with her something that no therapy had managed to provide so far: the genuine simplicity of someone who sees possibilities where others only see limitations. The night fell gently over New York City, while three hearts held each in their own way the expectation that tomorrow could be different. Robert, with his uncertainties as a dedicated father, Michael and Gabriel with their silent childhood dreams, and Beatrice with her intuition that those boys needed something very simple and yet very complex, someone who believed they could be happy exactly as they were. Thursday morning arrived with that golden clarity typical of a New York autumn. Beatrice woke up before her alarm, eager to return to the mansion. Throughout the night, Michael and Gabriel's faces had filled her thoughts, and she felt a strange restlessness in her chest, as if something important was about to happen. On the crowded bus that took her from the Bronx to Greenwich, she watched the gradual change in the urban landscape. The simple houses and public housing buildings gave way to luxurious condominiums and imposing mansions. It was like crossing into different worlds, each with its own rules and realities. In her worn cloth bag, Beatrice carried a small notebook where she jotted down her impressions from her education studies. That morning she had written a sentence she read in a college book: "Every child has the right to simply be a child." Constance was waiting for her at the service entrance of the mansion, already in her impeccable uniform and with her usual warm smile. The two women began their cleaning routine in the ground floor rooms, but Beatrice couldn't fully concentrate on her tasks. Her ears were attuned to the sounds of the house, especially those coming from the therapy room where Michael and Gabriel were doing their morning exercises. Around 10 o'clock, as they were finishing vacuuming the Persian rug in the library, Robert came down the stairs carrying a leather briefcase, his cell phone glued to his ear. He gestured as he spoke about spreadsheets and quarterly goals, completely absorbed in the world of business. Beatrice watched him discreetly and noticed how different he seemed there, in that domestic setting. The confident and controlling man from business meetings gave way to someone who walked through his own hallways with a certain tension in his shoulders, as if carrying an invisible weight. After Robert left for work, the house took on a calmer rhythm. The therapists arrived punctually, as always, and Beatrice was able to observe the twins' routine more closely. Michael was slightly more communicative than Gabriel, although both maintained that serious and obedient posture that bothered her so much. During the breaks between sessions, the boys would stay in the adapted living room, silently playing with educational toys carefully selected by specialists. It was during lunch that the first moment of real connection happened. Beatrice was organizing the dishes in the kitchen when she heard a strange noise coming from the dining room. Gabriel had spilled his juice cup and was desperately trying to clean up the mess with his napkin, clearly worried about the potential reaction. Mrs. Maris, the nanny, approached quickly, already starting to gently scold him about being more careful. Beatrice didn't think twice. She approached the table with a dish towel in her hands and a genuine smile on her face. "Hi, Gabriel. What a beautiful color this juice is. It looks like you've painted the table orange," she said naturally, starting to clean without making a drama of the situation. "You know, when I was little, my mom used to say that spilling orange juice brings good luck. Something good is going to happen today, you can bet on it." The boy looked at her with surprise, not used to such relaxed reactions to his small accidents. Michael was also watching intently, as if trying to decipher this new person who had appeared in their lives. Beatrice continued talking as she cleaned, telling funny stories about things she and her siblings used to spill as children. For the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, she saw the hint of a smile on Gabriel's face. "Do you have siblings?" Michael asked shyly, surprising even Mrs. Maris, who rarely saw him initiate a conversation with strangers. "I have 3, Beatrice replied, sitting in the chair next to him. "Junior is 25, Amanda is 22, and the youngest is Bruno, he's 15. Our house is always a mess, everyone talking at the same time, the dog barking, the TV on. It's very different from here." "That must be nice," Gabriel murmured, and there was something in his voice that deeply touched Beatrice's heart. It was as if he were talking about a distant, almost magical world, where children could make noise and messes without being reprimanded. The afternoon unfolded differently. During the therapy breaks, Beatrice found discreet ways to interact with the twins. She had no training in special education, didn't know the specific techniques that all the professionals applied religiously, but she had something that was perhaps even more valuable: the ability to see Michael and Gabriel as normal children who happened to use wheelchairs. When the boys had free time before their last session of the day, Beatrice found them in the living room, mechanically playing with a pedagogical puzzle. She approached and, without asking for permission, sat on the rug beside them. "Can I play too? It's been so long since I've done a puzzle," she said, picking up a piece and purposely trying to fit it in the wrong place. Michael let out a small laugh. "Not there, Auntie B," said Gabriel, using the nickname he had invented for her. "That piece is from the sky. Look at the blue color." "Auntie B," she repeated, feeling her heart warm. "I like that name. Can I be your Auntie B?" Both boys agreed enthusiastically, and for the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, Beatrice heard their genuine laughter. It was crystal clear laughter, full of life that echoed through the room like music. Mrs. Maris watched with some surprise, not used to seeing the twins so spontaneous with someone they had known for such a short time. The moment of greatest transformation came late in the afternoon, when the therapies ended, and the boys would normally spend their time until dinner in quiet, controlled activities. The day was particularly warm, with the sun still strong despite the late hour. Beatrice had finished her tasks and was helping Constance put away the cleaning supplies when she heard Michael comment to Gabriel that he wished he could feel the wind on his face. "Why don't we go outside?" Beatrice suggested, spontaneously. "The pool terrace must be lovely right now." Mrs. Maris hesitated, explaining that the boys didn't usually use that area without medical supervision, but there was something in Beatrice's tone, a contagious naturalness, that made her agree to accompany them, just to get some fresh air. The terrace was truly magnificent. The afternoon breeze made the pool water dance gently, creating mesmerizing golden reflections. Michael and Gabriel positioned themselves near the edge, fascinated by the movement of the water. It was as if they were seeing it for the first time, even though the pool had been a part of their lives forever. "Do you know how to swim?" Beatrice asked, sitting on the edge with her feet in the water. "We do hydrotherapy," Michael replied. "But it's different. There are a bunch of bars, and the water is kind of cold, and the physical therapist keeps telling us to do exercises." "And do you like it?" Gabriel shook his head. "It's boring. The lady keeps telling us to push, to move our arm like this, to move our leg like that. It's not fun." Beatrice looked at the wonderful pool and then at the boys' faces. An idea began to form in her mind, something that challenged all the logic and protocol that governed that house. She knew it wasn't her responsibility, that she didn't have authorization, that it would be a complete breach of the established rules. But she also knew that sometimes rules need to be broken for the sake of something greater. What if we just got in the pool to feel the water? No exercises, no having to push anything, just to cool off. Mrs. Maris immediately protested, explaining that it would be impossible without the proper equipment, without the presence of a physical therapist, without Mr. Miller's permission. But Michael and Gabriel looked at Beatrice with a hope in their eyes that she couldn't ignore. "Look, Mrs. Maris," Beatrice said gently, "I know it's not the protocol, but what if we stay right there in the shallow end? I'll be in the water with them, you can watch from here. If anything goes wrong, we'll get out right away." The nanny was clearly torn between her duty to follow the rules and her desire to see the boys happy. In her 3 years of caring for them, she had rarely seen them so excited about anything. It was Gabriel who made the decision. "Please, Mrs. Maris, we promise we'll be careful." And Michael added, "Auntie Bay will be with us." Perhaps it was the afternoon heat, perhaps it was the sincerity in the children's eyes, or perhaps it was simply the fact that she too had grown tired of seeing these boys live like prisoners in golden cages. Mrs. Maris sighed deeply and agreed, on the condition that it would be for just a few minutes and in the shallowest part of the pool. Beatrice helped the twins transfer from their wheelchairs to the edge of the adapted pool. The lift system was there, but she preferred to do everything manually, with care and affection. Michael and Gabriel trembled with anxiety and excitement as she held them firmly, slowly lowering them into the warm water. What happened next was magical. As soon as they felt the water enveloping their bodies, the boys transformed. The tension they carried in their shoulders dissolved, and for the first time, Beatrice saw them completely relaxed. She held them steady, but let them feel the lightness the water provided, the sensation of floating without the weight of their chairs, without the pressure of expectations. "It's like flying," Michael whispered, moving his arms freely in the water. Gabriel laughed, a loose, happy laugh that echoed across the terrace. He tried to splash water with his hands, creating small waves that fascinated him. There were no therapeutic objectives here, no goals to meet. It was just the pure joy of two children discovering the pleasure of playing in the water. Beatrice encouraged them with sweet words, telling stories about mermaids and colorful fish that lived at the bottom of the sea. She created simple games like who could make the most bubbles in the water, or who could float the longest. Michael and Gabriel competed with each other, laughing and having fun like they never had before. It was in this moment of pure joy that Robert arrived home early from work. He went straight up to the terrace, looking for his sons as he did every day, and was met with a scene that left him completely speechless. There were Michael and Gabriel in the water, laughing like he had never seen them laugh. And there was that young woman, the housekeeper's daughter, holding his sons with a naturalness that impressed him. There was no sophisticated equipment, no specialized professionals, no protocol whatsoever. It was just a simple young woman giving his sons what thousands of dollars in therapy had failed to provide. The genuine experience of being a child. Robert felt a mixture of emotions that confused him. There was surprise, certainly, a bit of fear, perhaps, but above all, there was something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense that he might be seeing his sons for the first time as they truly were, not as patients to be treated, but as children who deserved moments of pure joy. Mrs. Maris saw him arrive and hurried to explain the situation, clearly nervous about her employer's potential reaction. But Robert raised his hand, asking for silence, and stood there watching quietly. Watching how Michael tried to teach Gabriel to make waves with his arms, watching how Beatrice encouraged them without pressure, supported them without suffocating, watching how his sons finally seemed free. When Beatrice finally noticed Robert's presence, she felt her heart race. She knew she had overstepped all boundaries, that she would probably lose the job she so desperately needed. But looking at Michael and Gabriel still laughing in the water, she couldn't regret what she had done. "Mr. Miller," she began, trying to explain, but he interrupted her with a gesture. "Continue," he said simply. "Please, continue." And Beatrice continued, now conscious of Robert's eyes on them, but without losing the naturalness that had won over the twins. She helped them play for a few more minutes until the sun began to set and the water temperature grew cooler. When they finally got out of the pool, Michael and Gabriel were transformed. Their eyes shone in a way Robert hadn't seen since they were babies. They talked excitedly about the experience, wanting to know when they could do it again, telling their father details as if they had lived the greatest adventure of their lives. That night, as he put his sons to bed, Robert realized that something fundamental had changed. Michael and Gabriel were talking to each other about the afternoon in the pool, planning new games for the next time, daydreaming about aquatic adventures. It was the first time he had seen them with positive expectations for the future, with a genuine desire for tomorrow to come quickly. When he finally went down to his office, Robert found himself rethinking everything he had built for his sons. All that perfect structure, all that meticulous care, all that absolute protection. In his effort to give the boys the best life possible, had he forgotten to let them simply live? Outside, New York was preparing for another night, with its millions of inhabitants following their routines. But in the Greenwich mansion, 3 lives had been irreversibly touched. Robert, questioning his absolute certainties. Michael and Gabriel discovering they could be happy in ways they had never imagined. And Beatrice who, without knowing it, had planted the first seed of a transformation that would forever change the destiny of that family. The days following that moment in the pool brought subtle but significant changes to the routine of the mansion in Greenwich. Robert couldn't stop thinking about the scene he had witnessed, and for the first time in years, he began to question whether the entire structure he had created for his sons was truly providing them with the happiness they deserved. On Friday morning, he made an unprecedented decision. He cancelled an important meeting at the office to stay home and observe the twins' routine more closely. He positioned himself discreetly in the library, from where he had a view of the therapy room, and began to pay attention to details that had previously gone unnoticed. During the physical therapy session, he noticed how Michael and Gabriel mechanically performed the exercises, without showing any enthusiasm. Their expressions were of forced concentration, as if they were fulfilling a painful obligation. The physical therapist, Dr. Helen Carter, a respected professional who had been coming to the house for 2 years, conducted the session with her usual technical efficiency, but for the first time, Robert noticed the coldness of that clinical environment. Beatrice arrived around 9:00, along with Constance, and Robert carefully observed his son's reaction when they saw her. The faces that moments before had been serious and focused immediately lit up. Michael gave her a discreet wave, and Gabriel whispered something to his brother that made them laugh quietly, until they were reprimanded by the therapist for a lack of concentration. During the break between sessions, Robert saw Beatrice approach the boys in the living room. She had no agenda, carried no equipment, followed no protocols. She simply sat on the rug and started talking to them about mundane things: the cartoon on television, the color of the flowers in the garden, a funny story about her neighbor's cat. And the boys responded in a completely different way. They spoke excitedly, asked questions, shared small experiences from the previous day. It was as if a completely new version of Michael and Gabriel emerged in the presence of this simple young woman, a version Robert didn't know but desperately wanted to know better. When it was time for lunch, Robert came down to join the family as he did every day, but this time, he really paid attention to the conversation. Traditionally, he would ask about their progress in therapies, the exercises they had done, the goals they had achieved. It was always a conversation focused on results, on improvements, on future targets. "So guys, how were the exercises today?" he asked, following his usual script. "They were fine, Dad," Michael replied politely, but without enthusiasm. Gabriel just nodded, focused on the food specially prepared by Rose. Robert felt a strange discomfort. There was something deeply wrong with this dynamic, but he didn't know how to change it. For years, he had convinced himself that talking about therapies and progress was his way of showing interest in his sons' lives. Now he realized that he might have just been reinforcing the idea that they were defined by their limitations. It was then that Beatrice appeared at the entrance to the dining room, carrying a vase of fresh flowers she had arranged for the table. She smiled at the twins and commented, "This food smells delicious. Rose really outdid herself today, huh?" "Auntie B, will you have lunch with us?" Gabriel asked spontaneously. Beatrice looked at Robert, clearly unsure how to respond. Staff didn't usually have meals with the family. It was an unwritten rule of the house. "Of course you can," Robert said, surprising everyone, including himself. "Please, sit with us." And so, for the first time in years, lunch in the mansion had a different atmosphere. Beatrice told stories from her childhood, asked genuine questions about the boys' interests that had nothing to do with therapy or medicine. Michael discovered that he really liked drawing, and Gabriel revealed a secret passion for cars, especially the race cars he watched on television. "You really like Formula One?" Beatrice asked Gabriel, genuinely interested. "I love it too. My brother Bruno is a huge Lewis Hamilton fan." Gabriel's eyes lit up. "I like Verstappen, he's so fast." Robert watched this conversation with a mixture of fascination and melancholy. Discovering that his own sons had interests he knew nothing about was a shock. How had he missed this basic information about his boys' personalities? The afternoon brought the occupational therapy session with Dr. Patricia Morris, a specialist who came to the house 3 times a week. Robert once again observed discreetly. The therapist worked with the twins on motor coordination exercises, using blocks, pencils, and other tools to develop their skills. It was important work, certainly, but conducted with the same technical coldness as always. When the session ended, Robert saw Beatrice approach again. This time, she had brought sheets of paper and colored crayons. "How about we do some free drawing?" she suggested. "No rules, no having to draw anything specific, just whatever comes to your mind." Michael and Gabriel were initially confused. They were used to directed activities, with clear objectives, with a well-defined right and wrong. The idea of creating without a therapeutic purpose was new to them. But Beatrice started drawing on her own paper, creating abstract, colorful shapes and inventing stories for each scribble. "Look, this one is a dragon that eats clouds," she said, laughing, "and this is a bird that flies backward because it thinks it's more fun." Gradually, the twins loosened up. Michael began to draw flying cars, explaining to Beatrice how they worked and where they were going. Gabriel created a crazy racetrack full of impossible curves, where his favorite drivers raced on tracks that went through the clouds. Robert watched everything from his hiding spot and felt something stir in his chest. It was as if he were seeing his sons for the first time, not as patients in treatment, but as creative, life-filled children. Why had it taken him so long to realize this? That afternoon, as Beatrice was preparing to leave, Robert called her into his office. She entered nervously, still not used to the grandeur of the room filled with diplomas, trophies, and modern art. "Please, sit down," he said, indicating one of the leather armchairs. "I wanted to talk to you about the boys." Beatrice braced herself for the worst. She would surely be reprimanded for breaking protocols, for acting outside her role, for interfering with the family's carefully established routine. "First, I want to apologize," Robert began, surprising her completely. "When I arrived yesterday and saw you in the pool, my first reaction was shock. Not for the boys' safety. I saw you were taking good care of them, but because I realized that in 3 years of caring for them, I have never been able to make Michael and Gabriel laugh like that." Beatrice didn't know what to say. She had prepared for a scolding, not for such an honest and vulnerable conversation. "Can you explain how you do it?" Robert asked. "How do you come in here and in 2 days build an intimacy with them that I, as their father, am still trying to build?" The question was heavy with pain, and Beatrice felt compassion for this man who had everything money could buy, but was lost when it came to his own sons. "Mr. Miller," she said gently, "you don't need to build anything. Michael and Gabriel love you in a way that's impossible to measure. They talk about you with a pride in their eyes that's beautiful to see. But then why are they so different when I'm around? Why do they seem afraid of disappointing me?" Beatrice thought carefully before answering. "Maybe it's because you want what's best for them so much that you've forgotten to ask what they want for themselves. Every conversation is about therapy, about improvements, about what they need to do to get better. But what if they're already fine just the way they are?" Robert was silent for a long moment, absorbing her words. It was a revolutionary concept for him. The idea that Michael and Gabriel were already fine, already whole, already happy, or could be, if he stopped constantly trying to fix them. "Do you have a degree in special education?" he asked. "I'm finishing my degree in education," Beatrice replied. "But that's not what helps me with them. It's just, I don't see wheelchairs when I look at Michael and Gabriel. I see 2 incredible kids who want to play, tell stories, and get into mischief like any other child. And the therapies, the exercises, all the medical work we do? It's important, of course," Beatrice said carefully. "But maybe it doesn't have to be the only thing in their lives. Maybe they need time to just be kids, without objectives, without goals, without having to prove anything to anyone." Robert stood up and walked to the window overlooking the pool. The afternoon sun made the water sparkle, and he could almost see the ghosts of yesterday's laughter echoing across the terrace. "I want to make you a proposal," he said finally. "Besides helping your mother with the cleaning, could you spend a few hours a day with the boys? Not as a therapist, not with specific objectives, just as a friend who plays with them." Beatrice felt her heart race. "Are you sure?" "I am," he replied, turning to face her. "For 3 years I have done everything to give my sons the best life possible. I've spent fortunes on equipment, professionals, therapies. But in 2 days, you did something I couldn't do in 3 years. You made them remember that they are children. But what about the therapists, the doctors? They won't agree to this. Robert smiled, a smile Beatrice hadn't seen before, lighter and more genuine. Leave the doctors to me. From now on, we're going to have a balance. Time for therapy and time for fun. Time to improve and time to be happy. That night, after Beatrice had left, Robert did something he hadn't done in years. He played with his sons without an agenda. He sat on the living room floor and asked them to teach him their favorite games. Michael taught him the rules of a card game he had invented, and Gabriel showed him how to make paper cars. For a whole hour, there was no talk of therapies, exercises, or medical progress. They just talked about wonderful nonsense, the kind of unimportant conversations that are, in fact, the most important of all. Robert discovered that Michael had a sharp sense of humor, and that Gabriel was incredibly observant, noticing details that everyone else missed. When it was time for bed, the twins did something unprecedented. They asked their father to tell them a story. Not an educational story, or one with a moral, just a fun story with no purpose other than to entertain. Robert found himself inventing an adventure about two brave brothers who traveled the universe in flying chairs, saving planets and making friends with aliens. Michael and Gabriel laughed, asked questions, and suggested new elements for the story. It was the first time the three of them had shared a moment of pure imagination and complicity. After the children were asleep, Robert stayed up late in his office, thinking about what he had learned in those 2 days. He had spent so much time focused on giving his sons everything they needed to survive, that he had forgotten to give them what they needed to live. Beatrice had arrived like a quiet storm in their lives, questioning truths he had considered absolute, showing him possibilities he didn't even know existed. And most impressively of all, she had done it without specialized degrees, sophisticated equipment, or any resource other than her genuine ability to see Michael and Gabriel for who they really were. The next morning, Robert made a decision that would completely change the dynamic of the house. He would cut the boys' therapy load in half, creating space in their schedule for free activities, for play, for moments of pure fun. It would be a quiet but profound revolution. He also realized something about himself. For 3 years, he had hidden behind the figure of the protective and providing father, but he had forgotten to simply be a father. He had become the manager of his sons' lives, when what they really needed was his presence, his companionship, and shared moments with no goal other than being together. Constance and Beatrice arrived on Saturday morning, unaware of the changes to come. Robert was waiting for them in the kitchen, having coffee with Rose and planning a completely different day. There would be no therapies that Saturday. There would be no mandatory exercises or goals to meet. There would only be a family rediscovering how to be happy together. And Beatrice, the young woman who had come to clean a house, was about to discover that she had cleaned much more than windows and floors. She had cleared away the invisible barriers that separated a father from his sons, creating space for love to grow more freely and naturally. Michael and Gabriel came down for breakfast that Saturday morning, not knowing that their lives were about to change forever. And Robert, for the first time in years, felt that it might be possible to be both a good father and allow his sons to simply be happy. Saturday dawned differently in the Greenwich mansion. For the first time in 3 years, there were no alarms, set to wake Michael and Gabriel early for physical therapy sessions. There were no rigid schedules posted on the refrigerator, no lists of exercises waiting to be completed. It was just a family Saturday, something Robert had forgotten could exist. When the twins came down for breakfast around 9 o'clock, they found an unprecedented scene. Their father was in the kitchen, helping Rose make pancakes. He was wearing a floral apron that belonged to the cook and had flour on his face, the result of a failed attempt to flip the batter in the pan. "Dad, what are you doing?" Michael asked, laughing at the sight. "Trying to make pancakes," Robert replied with an embarrassed smile. "Your Auntie Bee told me yesterday that you like them, so I thought I'd give it a try, but I think Rose's are much better." Gabriel clapped his hands with joy. "Can we help?" It was a simple question, but it echoed in Robert's heart like a revelation. When was the last time his sons had offered to help with something, not out of therapeutic obligation, but out of a pure desire to participate? "Of course you can," he said, moving their wheelchairs closer to the adapted stove. "You can be my assistant chefs." What followed was one of the most fun mornings that family had ever shared. Michael was responsible for separating the ingredients, counting the spoonfuls of sugar and measuring the milk. Gabriel took charge of mixing the batter, laughing with every splash that landed outside the bowl. And Robert discovered that being a father could be messy, fun, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. When Beatrice and Constance arrived, they found the kitchen in total disarray and the family smiling like never before. There was flour scattered on the floor, batter, splatters on the walls, and 3 people covered in ingredients from head to toe. "Auntie B," Gabriel shouted, waving a hand full of batter, "we're making pancakes." "I can see that," she said, laughing as she looked around the destroyed kitchen. "And by the looks of it, you're also making a beautiful mess." "The best mess in the world," Michael added, and they all laughed. Rose watched the scene with a mixture of horror and tenderness. In 20 years of cooking for wealthy families, she had never seen her employers have so much fun in her kitchen. She made a move to start cleaning up the mess, but Robert stopped her. "Leave it, Rose. We'll clean up later. Now it's time to try our pancakes." And so, for the first time in the history of that house, the family had breakfast in a messy kitchen, eating lopsided and burnt pancakes that had the special taste of shared moments. Beatrice was invited to sit at the table, and Constance was also included in the meal. It was a quiet revolution, the breaking of the rigid hierarchies that had always dominated that house. "Mr. Miller," Constance said timidly, "Dr. Helen called early, asking if she could come today for an extra session with the boys." Robert felt a knot in his stomach. He had completely forgotten to inform the therapists about the changes he intended to implement. He knew it wouldn't be an easy conversation. "You can call her back and tell her we won't be having therapy today," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Starting Monday, we'll have a new schedule." Michael and Gabriel looked at each other, clearly confused. They were used to the rigid routine of therapies, and the idea of a completely free day was strange to them. "So what are we going to do today?" Michael asked. Robert looked at Beatrice, who smiled encouragingly. "Whatever you want to do," he replied. "Today there are no rules, no schedules, no goals. Today is just for us to have fun." The answer left the twins initially lost. They had grown so accustomed to living within rigid structures that total freedom was a bit frightening. Beatrice noticed their hesitation and decided to help. "How about we start with an exploration of the house?" she suggested. "I bet there are corners you've never visited." And so an unexpected adventure began. The mansion, which the twins only knew through functional routes between therapies and meals, revealed itself as a universe of possibilities. They discovered an attic full of old objects, where they found photo albums from when Robert was a child. They saw pictures of the grandmother they never knew, the grandfather who died when they were babies, and family stories they had never heard. "Dad, were you little like us?" Gabriel asked, flipping through an album where a 6-year-old Robert appeared, smiling toothlessly on a red bicycle. "I was," Robert replied, sitting on the dusty floor beside his sons. "And I got into a lot more trouble than you two." "Tell us," Michael pleaded. And Robert found himself telling stories from his own childhood, adventures and mischief he had completely forgotten. He talked about the time he tried to fly by tying bed sheets to his arms and jumping off the bed, about the day he decided to paint the neighbor's dog blue, about playing with his cousins during vacations at the family farm upstate. Beatrice watched it all with a warm heart. She saw how Michael and Gabriel were discovering that their father had been a child like them, that he had made mistakes, gotten hurt, and dreamed of impossible things. It was as if Robert was becoming human in the eyes of his own sons, stepping down from the pedestal of infallible authority to become simply a person they could truly know and love. Lunch was an extension of that magical morning. Robert decided they would eat on the outdoor veranda, something they had never done. Rose prepared an impromptu picnic with sandwiches, fruit, and natural juices. They sat on mats on the ground as if they were in a park and talked about everything and nothing. It was during this meal that Michael asked a question that caught Robert off guard. "Dad, why isn't Mum here with us?" The silence that followed was heavy. Robert had always avoided talking about Francesca with the boys, not because he didn't love her, but because the pain of loss was still too intense. He had built a wall of silence around his wife's memory, thinking it would protect his sons from suffering. Beatrice sensed the difficulty of the moment and made a move to step away, giving the family privacy. But Robert stopped her with a gesture, realizing that her presence gave him the courage to face the conversation he had been postponing for 3 years. "Your mom was the most special person in the world," he began, his voice choked with emotion. "She died when you were born, but not because you did anything wrong. It was because sometimes sad things happen, even when we do everything right." "Was she pretty?" Gabriel asked. "Very pretty," Robert replied, taking his phone from his pocket and showing pictures of a radiant, pregnant Francesca, holding her belly with affection. "And she loved you more than anything in the world, every day of the pregnancy. She would talk to you, sing to you, tell you stories." "What kind of stories?" Michael wanted to know. Robert was surprised to realize he had never shared these memories with his sons. "She would make up adventures about 2 brave brothers who saved the world. She said you would be heroes when you grew up. Just like in the story you told last night," Gabriel exclaimed. "Just like that," Robert agreed, smiling through his tears. "I think I learned how to tell stories from her." Beatrice watched the scene with a heavy heart. She saw how Robert was allowing himself to be vulnerable for the first time, how the twins were getting to know their mother through their father's words, how that family was finally connecting in a true way through the memory of the one who united them. "Your mum would be happy seeing you today," Beatrice said softly. "Happy to see how brave, smart and special you are." "You think so?" Michael asked. "I'm sure of it," she replied. "And I think she would be proud of your dad too, seeing how he's learning to play and have fun with you." In the afternoon, reality knocked on the door again in the form of a call from Dr. Helen. Robert took it in his office, and the conversation was anything but easy. "Mr. Miller, I don't understand what's happening," the physical therapist said in an agitated voice. "The boys missed their session today, and now I've heard you want to cut the frequency of their therapies in half. This could compromise all the progress we've made in 3 years." Robert took a deep breath before answering. "Dr. Helen, I have great respect for your work and I know the importance of the therapies, but I've realized that my sons need more than just exercises. They need to be children. With all due respect, sir, but children with limitations like your sons can't afford the luxury of just being children. They need constant stimulation, continuous work, and strict discipline. If we relax now, they could regress significantly. And what if they're happy? Doesn't that count as progress?" There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Happiness is important, but it's not enough. Michael and Gabriel need to develop their motor skills to their fullest potential, and that only happens with disciplined work." Robert felt an irritation growing inside him. "They are 6 years old, Doctor. 6. When was the last time you saw them laugh during a session?" "Therapy isn't for laughing, it's for working." "And what if it could be both?" The conversation went on for another 20 minutes, with the physical therapist trying to convince Robert that he was making a serious mistake. She talked about wasted potential, about windows of opportunity that would close, about parental responsibility. When he finally hung up the phone, Robert felt exhausted. For the first time in years, he was being questioned by professionals he had considered infallible. But something inside him had changed. The image of Michael and Gabriel laughing in the pool, making pancakes, discovering their family history, was etched in his memory as proof that there were other forms of progress besides those measured on medical charts. Beatrice knocked on the office door shortly after. "Mr. Miller, the boys are asking if you'll come play with them in the garden." He looked out the window and saw Michael and Gabriel in the backyard, trying to fly a kite they had found in the attic. They were laughing at their failed attempts, having more fun with the failures than they would have with a perfect success. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" he asked Beatrice. "Dr. Helen said I'm harming their development." Beatrice approached the window and stood beside him, watching the boys. "Can I ask you something? What is the goal of all this development? What's the use of all this motor evolution if, in the end, they don't know how to be happy? But what if they need these skills in the future? What if I'm depriving them of important chances? And what if you're giving them the most important chance of all? The chance to discover who they are beyond their physical limitations?" Robert stood in silence, processing her words. "Mr. Miller, "Can I tell you something personal?" Beatrice asked. He nodded. "My brother Bruno had learning difficulties as a child. My mum took him to 1,000 specialists, put him through 1,000 therapies. And you know what helped him the most? It was the day my dad stopped trying to fix him and started accepting him. Bruno blossomed when he stopped seeing himself as a problem to be solved." "And is he okay today?" "He's a sophomore in high school, plays on the school soccer team, has a girlfriend, he's happy. Not because he overcame his difficulties, but because he learned that they don't define him." Robert looked at his sons in the garden again. Michael had managed to get the kite a few feet off the ground, and Gabriel was cheering as if it were the greatest achievement in the world. There was no therapist guiding their movements, no specific objective being worked on. It was just pure joy. "Will you accept a permanent position?" he asked suddenly. "Not as a cleaning assistant, but as, I don't quite know the job title, someone who teaches my sons how to be happy." Beatrice felt tears well up in her eyes. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." That night, after Michael and Gabriel were asleep, Robert made a series of decisions that would completely change the course of their lives. He would reduce the therapies to 3 times a week, creating space for free activities, play, and family time. He would officially hire Beatrice as the boys' educator and companion. And most importantly, he would start treating his sons not as patients in recovery, but as normal children who deserved a happy childhood. In the twins' room, Michael and Gabriel were whispering before falling asleep. "Gabriel, did you like today?" Michael asked. "I liked it a lot. Dad was different, wasn't he?" "Yeah. He became our friend. And is Auntie B going to stay with us forever?" "I think so. And you know what else?" "What?" "I think Mom is happy up in heaven, seeing us happy down here." Gabriel smiled in the dark. "I think so too." Outside, New York was preparing for another night, but in the Greenwich mansion, a family was preparing for a new life, a life where love didn't need to be measured in medical progress, where happiness didn't need therapeutic justifications, where 2 special children could simply be children. And Beatrice, who had come to clean a house, discovered that she had found much more than a job. She had found a family that needed her as much as she needed a chance to start over. Destiny, sometimes, works through the most unlikely people, creating connections that change lives forever. The weeks that followed brought a gradual but profound transformation to the routine of the mansion in Greenwich. Robert had implemented the promised changes, reducing the therapies and creating space for free activities in the twins' schedule. Beatrice now officially worked as the boys' educator and companion, earning a salary that not only allowed her to help her family, but also to finish her education degree without financial difficulties. Michael and Gabriel blossomed in a way that surprised even Robert. They laughed more, talked more, asked questions about everything, and showed curiosities that had been suppressed for years by a rigid routine. The house, once silent and controlled, now echoed with the sounds of life, laughter, animated conversations, and even some healthy sibling arguments. But not everything was perfect. The resistance from the healthcare professionals intensified as they realized Robert was determined to maintain the changes. Dr. Helen, the physical therapist, had sent a formal report questioning his decisions and suggesting the family seek a second medical opinion. Dr. Patricia, the occupational therapist, had been even more direct, stating that she was washing her hands of the twins' future motor development. Robert felt the weight of responsibility, especially during sleepless nights when doubts haunted him. What if he was wrong? What if the professionals were right about the need for strict discipline? What if, in the future, Michael and Gabriel blamed him for not making the most of their childhood developmental windows? It was on one of these sleepless nights, 3 weeks after the changes, that Robert decided to take a walk in the garden. The early morning was cool, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of the flowers Constance cared for so lovingly. He followed the path that circled the pool, remembering the day everything had begun to change. It was then that he heard a noise coming from the staff house, the small cottage at the back of the property where Constance kept her gardening supplies, and where she and Beatrice sometimes rested during their lunch break. A light was on in one of the windows, which was strange at that hour. Approaching discreetly, Robert discovered Beatrice was there, hunched over books and notebooks scattered across a rustic wooden table. She was studying intently, taking notes in a worn notebook, clearly preparing for a college assignment. A steaming cup of coffee beside her indicated she had been there for hours. Robert hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should interrupt her. But something about the scene touched him deeply. Here was a young woman who worked all day caring for his sons, came home tired, yet still found the energy to study in the dead of night, fighting for a better future. He knocked gently on the door. Beatrice looked up, surprised, and hurried to hide her books, clearly embarrassed to be using the staff quarters to study. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here at this hour. I just needed a quiet place to study and—" "It's all right," he interrupted gently. "Actually, I came out because I couldn't sleep and saw the light on. May I come in?" Beatrice nodded, still nervous. Robert sat down in a simple wicker chair, looking around the small room. It was a humble but cozy space, with plants in small pots, a few photos of Constance's family taped to the wall, and a wooden cross on a small shelf. "What are you studying?" he asked, noticing the open books. "Inclusive education," Beatrice replied. "I have an exam on Monday about methodologies for children with special needs." "And why don't you study at home?" Beatrice hesitated before answering. "My house is small, sir. I share a room with my sister Amanda, and Bruno is always up late playing video games in the living room. There's no quiet place to study. I can concentrate better here." Robert felt a pang of guilt. Here he was, the owner of a mansion with dozens of rooms, complaining of insomnia in his luxurious suite, while Beatrice had to leave her home in the middle of the night to find silence to study. "Starting tomorrow, you can use my library whenever you want," he said. "It has a large desk, internet, all the books you might need. And always fresh coffee," he added with a smile. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Miller, you already do so much for me. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do. You've transformed my sons' lives, Beatrice. The least I can do is offer you a proper place to study." They sat in silence for a few moments, listening only to the chirping of the garden crickets and the distant hum of the city traffic that never stopped. "Can I ask you something?" Robert said. "Why did you choose special education? What motivates you to work with children like Michael and Gabriel?" Beatrice closed her notebook and leaned back in her chair. "Because I believe that every child deserves the chance to discover what they are capable of. No matter what their limitations are, there's always something special inside them waiting to be discovered. That's very beautiful, but where does that certainty come from?" "From my own story, I guess." Beatrice looked out the window, as if drawing courage from the stars. "I had my own difficulties as a child. They weren't physical like Michael and Gabriel's, but they were real to me." Robert encouraged her to continue with a gesture. "I used to stutter a lot when I was little. It was terrible. At school, the other kids would laugh at me and teachers would get impatient when I tried to answer something. I felt stupid, incapable, different from everyone else." "And how did you overcome it?" "I didn't completely overcome it," she said honestly. "I still stutter sometimes when I get very nervous, but I learned that it doesn't define me. I had a fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Margaret, who changed my life. She didn't try to fix me, didn't send me to 1,000 therapies. She simply gave me time and showed me that I had other qualities." "What qualities?" "She discovered that I had a knack for understanding other children's feelings. When someone was sad or struggling, I always noticed. Mrs. Margaret started asking me to help classmates who were going through problems. I became a kind of mediator for the class." "And did that help with the stuttering?" "It helped with something much more important. It helped me discover who I was beyond the problem. I wasn't the girl who stutters. I was the girl who knew how to listen, who knew how to comfort, who had a special gift for caring for others." Robert listened to her story with a heavy heart. He saw so many similarities between Beatrice's experience and what his sons had lived through for years, being defined by their limitations, having their qualities overshadowed by what they couldn't do. "That's why you can see Michael and Gabriel differently," he said. "Exactly. Because I know what it's like to be reduced to a problem to be solved. And I know how liberating it is when someone sees the possibilities in you instead of the limitations. You're right about Mrs. Margaret. She gave you a precious gift. She did. And now I want to do the same for others. I want to be for other special children what she was for me. Robert was impressed by the maturity and depth of this young woman. At 28, Beatrice possessed a wisdom about life and overcoming adversity that he, with all his privileged education and resources, was only just beginning to discover. "Can I make a confession?" he said after a moment. "Of course. Sometimes I'm still afraid I'm doing the wrong thing with Michael and Gabriel. The doctors pressure me so much. They talk about lost potential, about missed chances, and I wonder if I'm being negligent." Beatrice leaned forward, looking directly into his eyes. "Mr. Miller, have you seen how your sons were before and how they are now?" "I have. They are much happier, more spontaneous, more alive." "Then you have your answer. Happiness is the best indicator of development there is. Happy children learn better, develop better, and face challenges better. But what if in the future they need skills they didn't develop because of my choices? And what if in the future they have confidence, self-esteem, and a joy for life? Because of your choices, do you think that's worth less than a few motor exercises?" Robert felt a profound sense of relief hearing those words. It was as if Beatrice was validating not just his decisions, but his deepest paternal instincts. "You know you're changing much more than just the boys' lives, right?" he said softly. "What do you mean?" "You're changing mine too. 3 years ago I lost my wife and thought I had also lost the capacity to be happy. I thought my role in life was just to ensure that Michael and Gabriel received the best possible care. And now? Now I've discovered that I can be their father, not just their provider. I can play, laugh, make messes, make mistakes. I can be human in front of them." Beatrice smiled, and there was something special about that smile that made Robert's heart race. They needed to meet this version of you, the version that makes lopsided pancakes and tells made-up stories. "And I needed to meet her too," he said, realizing his words had a double meaning he hadn't planned. A comfortable silence settled between them. Outside, the night was turning toward dawn, but neither of them seemed in a hurry to end the conversation. "Beatrice," Robert said finally, "have you thought about what you want to do after you finish college?" "Work in special education, of course. Maybe open an inclusive school, a place where special needs children and typical children study together. That's a beautiful dream." "It's just a dream for now. To open a school, you need a lot of money, much more than I'll ever make working as a teacher." Robert grew thoughtful. "What if it wasn't just a dream? What if it were a real project?" "What do you mean?" "What if I helped you make that dream a reality? As a partner, as an investor, as a partner in this project?" Beatrice looked at him in total surprise. "Mr. Miller, you barely know my professional qualifications. How can you propose a partnership like that? I know your human qualifications. I know your heart, your dedication, your ability to see the best in people, and for a special school, that's worth more than any diploma. But think about it, Beatrice. A school where Michael and Gabriel can study with other children, both special needs and typical. A place where every child is seen for their possibilities, not their limitations. A place where parents like me can learn to be better parents." Beatrice's eyes shone with emotion. It was a dream that seemed too distant to become a reality, but the sincerity in Robert's voice made her believe that perhaps it was possible. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. Robert hesitated before answering, because he knew his answer would reveal feelings he himself was only just beginning to understand. "Because you gave me back my sons. Because you gave me back the ability to be happy. Because—" He paused, struggling to find the right words. "Because you reminded me of who I am when I'm not trying to control everything." There was something in the air between them, a good tension, a connection that went beyond a professional relationship or gratitude. Beatrice felt it too, a warmth in her chest when she looked at Robert, an admiration that grew with every conversation. "Mr. Miller." "You can just call me Robert," he said softly. "Robert," she repeated, trying out the name. "I would be honored to be your partner in this project, but there's one thing I need to know. What is it? Why are you doing this, really? It's not just about the school, is it?" Robert took a deep breath. It was time to be honest with himself and with her. No, it's not just about the school, he admitted. It's because over the past few months, you've become very important to us, to me, and the idea of losing you, of you going your own way and leaving our lives, scares me. You won't lose me, Beatrice said softly. Michael and Gabriel mean so much to me. You all mean so much to me. Even if one day you get married, start your own family? The question hung in the air. Beatrice looked him directly in the eyes and answered with an honesty that surprised them both. I can't imagine a family that doesn't include the three of you. The silence that followed was charged with meaning. They both realized they were moving towards something new, something that would fundamentally change the nature of their relationship. But neither of them was in a hurry. There was something precious about this moment of mutual discovery. It's late, Robert said finally, looking at the clock. You need to rest. Yes, Beatrice agreed, starting to pack up her books. And thank you. For the conversation, for the offer of the library, for the school project, for everything. Thank you. For coming into our lives like a quiet storm and changing everything for the better. When Robert returned to the house, it was almost 4 a.m, but for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel sleepless. On the contrary, he felt a deep peace, as if important pieces of a puzzle had finally fallen into place. In his room, he looked out the window toward the cottage where Beatrice was, probably still finishing organizing her studies, and for the first time since Francesca's death, he allowed himself to imagine a future that included not just survival and medical care, but love, partnership, and genuine happiness. Michael and Gabriel slept peacefully in the next room, their quiet breaths echoing down the hall. They didn't know it yet, but their lives were about to change once more. But this time it wouldn't be because of therapies or treatments. It would be because of something much more powerful. A family that was learning to love each other completely and truly. The morning would bring new decisions, new challenges, and perhaps even new revelations. But for now the house slept in peace, lulled by the certainty that love, when it is true and courageous, always finds a way to flourish. 6 months after that early morning encounter, life in the Greenwich mansion had transformed in ways none of its residents could have imagined. What began as a simple change in the therapy routine had become a complete revolution in the family, professional, and personal dynamics of everyone involved. Saturday morning dawned special. It was the opening day of the Hope School, the project born from the conversation between Robert and Beatrice that was now becoming a reality. The building, a modern and accessible structure in Brooklyn, had been specially renovated to serve children with and without special needs in a truly inclusive environment. Michael and Gabriel woke up early, excited about the ceremony. At nearly 7 years old, they had become completely different boys from the silent, withdrawn children of months ago. They spoke loudly, laughed constantly, got into normal childhood mischief, and most importantly, had developed a self-confidence that radiated in everything they did. "Dad, is Auntie B here yet?" Michael asked. "Coming, down in the elevator for breakfast." "She should be arriving now," Robert replied, adjusting his tie. He himself was visibly nervous and excited. That day represented much more than the opening of a school. It was the materialization of a shared dream that had united two people from completely different worlds. Gabriel, always observant, noticed his father's anxiety. "Dad, are you nervous?" "A little," Robert admitted, smiling, "but it's a good kind of nervous. It's what you feel when something very important is happening." "Like when Auntie B came to live with us?" Michael asked, with the typical innocence of his age. Robert almost choked on his coffee. His son's perceptiveness sometimes surprised him. Beatrice hadn't officially moved into the mansion, but in practice, she spent so much time there that the difference was minimal. She kept her room at her family's home in the Bronx, but had agreed to stay in the mansion's guest suite during the week to more closely follow the boy's development. "Something like that," he replied, chuckling. The truth was that the relationship between Robert and Beatrice had evolved naturally and respectfully over the months. There was no rush, no pressure. They both understood they were building something solid, something that included not only their mutual feelings, but also the well-being of Michael and Gabriel and the future of the family they were forming together. Beatrice arrived shortly after, radiant in a light blue dress that Robert had bought for her, insisting that the school's opening was too special a moment not to be celebrated with special clothes. She had initially protested, saying she wasn't used to expensive gifts, but Robert had insisted with such affection that she eventually accepted. "Good morning, family," she said cheerfully, hugging the twins and greeting Robert with a kiss, on the cheek that lasted a second longer than usual. "Auntie B, you look beautiful," Gabriel exclaimed, always direct with his comments. "Thank you, sweetie. You two look so handsome too. Ready to see the school?" The boys cheered with excitement. They had participated in the entire process of creating the school, giving opinions on colors, toys, and even helping to choose some of the adapted furniture. To them, that school wasn't just a project for the adults, it was something they had helped build. The drive to Brooklyn was joyful and full of anticipation. Robert drove the adapted car. He had bought specifically to transport the twins' wheelchairs more easily, while Beatrice sat in the passenger seat, helping Michael and Gabriel identify familiar city landmarks along the way. When they arrived at the school, a small crowd was waiting. Constance was there with her entire family, including her husband John, and their children Amanda, Junior, and Bruno, all dressed in their best clothes for the occasion. Rose, the cook, had also been invited and brought her grandchildren. There were also some of Beatrice's college classmates, specialized teachers she had contacted to form the school's staff, and even some families interested in enrolling their children. The school itself was a dream come true. The colorful and cheerful facade contrasted with the functionality of the ramps and adapted entrances. Inside, the rooms were spacious and filled with natural light, with educational materials carefully selected to cater to children with different types of needs. There was an inclusive library with books in braille and audiobooks, an adapted art room, and a playground where wheelchairs could move freely among special swings and seesaws. But what was most striking was the atmosphere of the place. There was nothing clinical or hospital-like about it. It was genuinely a school, a place where children could learn, play, and grow together, regardless of their physical or cognitive differences. "It's exactly as I imagined," Beatrice whispered to Robert, as they watched Michael and Gabriel exploring the playground with other children who had arrived. "It's better than I imagined," he replied. "Look at them. They're already making friends." It was true. Michael was explaining to a boy his age how the brake on his wheelchair worked, while Gabriel was teaching a little girl how to make tighter turns. There was no awkwardness, no pity or discomfort. It was just a group of children being children, exploring a new space together. During the opening ceremony, Beatrice gave a moving speech about inclusion and the importance of seeing the possibilities in every child. Robert spoke about how he had learned that the best investment a father can make is in his children's happiness. But the most touching moment was when Michael and Gabriel together cut the symbolic ribbon that officially opened the school. "This school is for all the children who want to learn and have fun together," Michael said into the makeshift microphone, with the naturalness of someone who had grown up used to being heard. "And for parents to learn that being different isn't a problem," Gabriel added, drawing both laughter and tears from the small audience. Robert felt his heart overflow with pride. These children, who months ago could barely express their own desires, were now speaking confidently about inclusion and acceptance to an audience of adults. The afternoon extended into conversations, guided tours, and presentations of the methodologies that would be applied at the school. Beatrice was in her element, explaining to anxious parents how inclusive education would work in practice, how special needs and typical children would mutually benefit from being together. A mother, visibly emotional, approached her during the afternoon. "My daughter has Down syndrome," she said. "For years, I was told she needed a special school, separate from other children. But seeing your sons here today, seeing how they interact so naturally with everyone, I realize that maybe what she really needs is equal opportunities." "Exactly," Beatrice replied with kindness. "Special needs children don't need fewer opportunities. They need adapted opportunities. And most importantly, they need people to believe in them." Robert watched from a distance, impressed by Beatrice's transformation. The shy young woman he had met months ago had become a confident and inspiring educator, capable of touching hearts and changing perspectives with just her sincerity and experience. When the official event ended and the guests began to leave, the family gathered in the school's new library. Michael and Gabriel explored the adapted books, while Robert and Beatrice talked about the next steps. "We did it, didn't we?" she said, still a bit in disbelief. "The school is open, families are interested, the teachers are excited, we really did it." "You did it," Robert corrected. "I just provided the money, all the vision, all the heart of this place is yours." "Ours," she corrected back. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't believed in me." It was a small but significant shift in their dynamic. "Beatrice," Robert said, suddenly serious, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him attentively, sensing the change in his tone. "These past few months have been the happiest of my life since Francesca died," he began. "Not just because of the school, but because of everything. Because of you being here, of seeing Michael and Gabriel happy, of us building this family." "Robert, let me finish," he requested softly. "I know everything happened very quickly. I know we come from different worlds. I know it might be too soon. But I can no longer imagine my life without you, without us." Beatrice felt her heart race. She had been waiting for this moment, yet she still wasn't fully prepared for it. "I'm not asking for an answer right now," Robert continued. "I'm just saying that, if you want to, if it makes sense for you too, I would very much like you to consider the possibility of us building this officially, a real family." Before Beatrice could respond, Michael appeared beside them holding a storybook. "Dad, can you read to us?" he asked. "Of course," Robert replied, kneeling beside his son. Gabriel also came closer, and Beatrice naturally joined the group, sitting on the library's colorful rug. Robert began to read a story about a family of animals who find an abandoned baby and adopt him, creating a different but love-filled family. During the reading, Beatrice watched the scene and felt a sense of absolute clarity. There was her answer. Not in Robert's words, not in promises of the future, but in the natural way. The four of them formed a unit, in the affection with which Michael leaned against her during the story, in the way Gabriel held her hand, in the love she saw in Robert's eyes, not only when he looked at her, but when he looked at his sons. When the story ended, the twins ran off to explore other corners of the school. Robert and Beatrice were alone again. "You said you weren't asking for an answer right now," she said softly. "I did. But I want to give you one anyway." Robert felt his breath catch. "I can't imagine my life without you all either," Beatrice said, looking directly into his eyes. "Michael and Gabriel have become the sons of my heart, and you—" She paused, searching for the right words. "You gave me back my self-confidence, gave me the chance to achieve dreams I didn't even know I had. More than that, you showed me that it's possible to love and be loved completely. Does that mean—" "It means yes. Yes, to building this family officially. Yes, to the future you're offering me. Yes, to everything." Robert felt tears in his eyes. He moved closer to Beatrice and kissed her gently, a kiss that sealed not only their feelings, but also their commitment to the future they would build together. "Yay! Dad kissed Auntie B," Gabriel shouted from somewhere in the school, making Robert and Beatrice break apart, laughing. "I think someone was spying," Beatrice said, her cheeks flushed. "Is she going to be our mum now?" Michael asked, also appearing with a mischievous grin. Robert looked at Beatrice, who nodded positively, her eyes shining. "If you want her to be," he replied. "What do you think?" The answer came in the form of two enthusiastic hugs that nearly knocked Beatrice over. "Now we're a real family," Gabriel declared. "We already were," Michael corrected, with the wisdom of his almost 7 years. "Now we're an official family." The sun was setting over New York as they finally closed the school and headed home. The city buzzed with its constant motion, millions of people living their own stories of love, resilience, and discovery. But in the Greenwich mansion, 4 people carried in their hearts the certainty that they had found something rare and precious. A family created not just by blood ties, but by choice, love, and the courage to believe that everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. That night, after Michael and Gabriel were asleep, Robert and Beatrice sat on the pool terrace where it had all begun. The water mirrored the stars in the sky, and the silence was broken only by the soft sound of the ornamental fountain. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked. "I'm thinking that a year ago I was just an unemployed student who came to help her mom clean a house," Beatrice replied. "And today, I'm the director of a school and part of a family I never imagined I'd have." Life surprises us sometimes, doesn't it? Sometimes life gives us exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it. "Like you?" "Like the three of you," she corrected. "Michael and Gabriel taught me that every child has infinite potential waiting to be discovered. And you taught me that it's possible to start over, no matter how many times life knocks us down. And you taught us that family isn't about perfection. It's about love, acceptance, and being present for the moments that matter." They sat in silence for a few moments, just enjoying each other's company and the sense of completeness one rarely experiences in life. "Robert," Beatrice said finally. "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For having the courage to change, for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself, for showing me that true love is the kind that makes us want to be the best version of ourselves." Robert took her hand in his. "Thank you for coming into our lives like a disguised angel and saving not only my sons, but me too." Inside, Michael and Gabriel slept peacefully, dreaming of future adventures and games at their new school. In their room, the photos of Francesca remained on the nightstand, but now they shared the space with drawings they had made of their new family, including Beatrice as their mom of the heart. Life had taken unexpected turns to arrive at this moment. A tragedy transformed into resilience, a chance encounter that became destiny, a broken family that was rebuilt even stronger. And so, in the Greenwich mansion, as New York slept around them, 4 hearts beat in sync, united by the certainty that they had found in each other not just companionship, but the possibility of writing a love story, together that transcended all difficulties and limitations. Michael, Gabriel, Robert, and Beatrice, a family created by the most unlikely circumstances, but held together by the truest feelings. A family that had learned that happiness is not in the absence of problems, but in the presence of people who love us exactly as we are, with all our imperfections and quirks. The pool where it all began was still there, a silent witness to transformations that no amount of money could buy. And in its calm waters were reflected not only the stars in the sky, but the promise that true love always finds a way to prevail, even in the moments we least expect it. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Michael, Gabriel, Robert, and Beatrice has deeply touched your hearts. This story teaches us that true wealth is not in what we possess, but in the love we share and the courage we have to accept the differences that make us unique. If this narrative stirred emotions in you, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments which moment marked you the most. Every day we bring stories that reveal the beauty and complexity of the human soul, showing that there is always hope when we open our hearts to the unexpected. Until the next episode, where other emotions and discoveries await you.